So you have character in the middle. That's first and foremost. That's where we start with everybody. If you can't lead yourself first, you're just a person out for a walk. You're not a leader.
Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we feature top leaders on how they measure success in their business and life. Now, let's learn from their experiences.
Carl J. Cox. I'm the host of the Measure Success podcast, where we talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. This episode is brought to you by 40 Strategy. At 40 Strategy, we help build strategy for small to medium-sized companies and organizations by helping them design a world-class strategic plan, but more importantly, help keep them accountable to actually get it done. To learn more, go to 40strategy.com. We also have released our book recently, Lost at CEO, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Strategy. It's a wonderful, easy read, but with really great principles for you to get to learn in a fable format. Go to Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, or if you like to listen on the road like this podcast, go to Audible.com. With that, we'd like to say a thank you to Marcus Ogden. He is who introduced us to our guest here today. Thank you, Marcus, former NFL player. He himself has a great podcast. I encourage you to go out and listen to that one. Well, our guest today here is David Kitchen. He is the author of 2 books, author of The Pyramid, a system for developing tomorrow's leaders today, and he also has a book, The Scoreboard, a self-audit system to help you build the life you want. He's also the founder and president of the Edge Leadership Academy. He's consulted over 35 NCAA teams, including the University of Miami, football, and many 8-figure corporations. He's also had the opportunity to deliver keynotes and coaching to over 100 coaches, administrative, and C-suite executives across multiple industries. With that, David, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
What's going on, brother? Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to do this. I don't know when it'll get released, but I told you earlier it's Finish Friday, so we're jacked up around these parts, man. So we'll bring the energy today and have a great conversation.
Love that. Love it. We're going to fire it up. We're going to have a good time. And with that, David, give us a little bit more color about your core business. So in your words, what do you do? How do you make a difference out there?
Yeah, put very simply, man, we simplify high performance, we simplify leadership, we simplify culture. And what I mean by that is there's so many areas out there that we can find information on all those things: leadership, culture, high performance. Those are all buzzwords. And we often find ourselves diving through pages and pages of theory. Our job and what we do at Edge is we deliver execution. We teach you frameworks, we teach you simple systems, repeatable processes that you can put into your life and your business that's going to make a difference today. So the big thing we promise people is when you walk out of our workshops, when you walk out of our keynotes, you're not just going to walk out with a bunch of notes. You will have that, but you're also going to walk out feeling confident that you can implement this stuff. So that's what we do, man. That's it in a nutshell. We want to help people win.
You know, David, I think you bring up a really interesting point, and it's with our companies that we have. And for those who have a company, or perhaps you're a leader or a manager in a company, what we typically teach is skills. We need you to do this job, right? And this is the job we do, and this is how we make money. But what we don't typically do is teach about how to lead people. We may teach a little bit of how to manage, but not typically even very well, but we're not teaching really how to lead. So I'm curious from your perspective, how did you learn to lead? You know, what things did you have over your career that got you to your current point where you feel comfortable and people are asking you to speak towards others?
Man, so much of it was trial and error, right? And so much of it was figuring it out along the way, making a lot of mistakes, which we all do, but finding my way, right? And so I was fortunate from a very young age to be put in leadership roles, right? Starting at my childhood. I mean, I was raised in a single parent household, so I was the man of the house at 9 years old. You know, I never met my biological father. My stepfather was in and out of the picture. He was officially gone at like 10. So from that age on, I was in leadership roles, whether it was leading in my family, leading in my community. I was fortunate to be a good football player on a great team. So I got the opportunity to lead in those roles. And then when I got into coaching, it was 30 years of experience in a 10-year career. Like, I became the youngest head strength coach in the country at 24 years old. And so I got into these rooms where I got to be surrounded by great mentors, and I got to see so many leadership examples from the people around me, and seeing how leadership is done in all these high performing environments, right? All the way up to major college football, Division I football, major college basketball. I mean, you're seeing these really high performing cultures and high performing environments. And it's like, for me, every day was a masterclass in leadership. And it was awesome to be able to build all that. And then going back to school and getting a master's in sports psychology, working on a PhD in psychology as well. Like, it was almost this crash course my entire life leading to this point, to what I do now.
It's so fascinating how leadership, and I think it's a reason why people don't know how to teach it, is because there is so much psychology, right, in all of this. Like, how do we help people to think differently, to help lead properly, and help, it's that classic, you push something, right? But if you could help bring them to water, so to speak, if you could help bring people where they're naturally wanting to come to the source. So curious from your perspective, what are some of the key principles when you're doing a present, you're starting out with a group, and I know you have a system. Tell us about your system that you have of how you walk through these key principles to teach people how to be more effective leaders.
Yeah, so to be honest, Carl, when we started to develop the system, what I did was went back through the best leaders that I had been around and the best leaders that I had seen in athletics and in business. And I was like, okay, what do they have in common? And then I started to match that up against what other high-performing leaders had. So other famous leaders in history, famous leaders throughout business and industry. And I was like, okay, let me find all these common threads. And then what I did was I dove through the psychology research, and I was like, what are the commonalities here? And if I could boil these things down, these kind of intangibles, right, that we say, these things that are feelings but we can't describe them, if I could put a word to it, what would that word be? And I used the psychology research to guide that. And what I found, luckily for me, the business and the entrepreneurship gods looked down on me and said, hey, they all happen to start with C, so here's your marketing, right? And so we had these 5 C's that we use with every client that we work with. And it starts with character, right? So the way that we picture it is kind of a quadrant with character sitting right in the middle. So you have character in the middle. That's first and foremost. That's where we start with everybody. If you can't lead yourself first, you're just a person out for a walk. You're not a leader, right? And so we have to make sure that we are somebody worth following that's going somewhere worth going. So we start with the character piece first, and then from there we operate off of psychology principles, right? So humans operate and we build trust off of pattern recognition. Well, how do we build patterns with people? We're consistent, right? How do we build trust? We're consistent. We show up in the same way. So our second C is consistency. So we talk about consistency in vision, consistency in action, consistency in reaction and response. Right? And then we move on to commitment. We have to show the people within our organization that we're committed to the vision, we're committed to the people, we're committed to the culture. That's super important, right? We have to show that and model it on a daily basis. Once you have those first 3 C's in place, the fun stuff starts, because now you get to be creative, right? So that's our 4th C. And when we talk about leadership in any realm, it's almost synonymous with creativity, right? If you think about a Super Bowl winning quarterback, nobody says he managed his team to a Super Bowl. We all say he led them, right? If we think about the businesses that crushed it during the pandemic and made a big pivot, that's a result of creative leadership. And so creativity to us is a core part of being able to lead. And it's not only building creativity in yourself, but building creativity in your team. So that's where like your critical problem solving skills come in, the way that your team has conflict and is able to work through that. All of those are examples of creativity. And then our last C is the one that everybody's always waiting on. Like sometimes we do these and then we get through our 4 C's and everybody's like, is he going to say it? Is he going to say it? So here it is. It's communication, right? It's communication. It's your ability to communicate with your people. And I'm not just talking about the words you speak. I'm talking about the body language piece. I'm talking about the groundwork that goes into it beforehand. And I'm talking about the empathetic listening. Like great leaders are great listeners. And your ability to ask questions and work through feedback channels. So that's our system, is those 5 C's, and we attack everything from that foundational level. And then there's a ton of skills and packages that we put within each of those, but those are where we start.
What have you found of the 5 C's is the hardest to implement?
Character, because most people don't take time to think about who they truly are. And without getting on too much of a soapbox, I think it's a result of our school system. I think it's a result of what we are programmed to do as a society. But I urge leaders all the time to think about, who are you as a person? Beyond your company's vision, mission, and values, who are you? Right? Because every leader when you do anything, any activity, any interaction, any project that you work on, any team that you build should have your signature on it somewhere. That's what authentic leadership is, right? And so if you don't know what your vision, mission, and values are as a human, how can you intertwine them? How can you marry them with the vision, mission, and values of an organization and lead authentically? And so it's the easiest, but it's also the most difficult, right? So I shouldn't say easiest. It's the simplest, but it's also the most difficult to implement because people have never thought about it. And so sitting down with an adult, and saying, hey, what do you stand for? What do you want at the end of your life? What is your daily mission? What do you show up every day and try and do? What are the values that ground you when all else is stripped away? Who are you? Right? And I think that's a really difficult question for people to ask. But when you do answer it, you're no longer swayed by all the outside things. So it allows you to increase your capability in all the other C's, right? Because if I know who I am, I'm super consistent. I know what I'm chasing, right? I'm able to be committed to certain things because I know who I am. I don't have shiny object syndrome because I know what my vision is. I know what my mission is. I know what my values are. I'm able to be creative because I know where I'm trying to go. So I can be flexible in the approach because I know what the end goal is. So I'm also grounded in myself. So I'm able to ask for help and be creative about putting people in places to make plays and make decisions and lead their own teams. And then also I can communicate extremely effectively because I'm not swayed by my ego and my emotions. I'm able to be the same person every day. You're able to walk into a room and not try and remember what mask to put on. Right, so that's the piece. That's the linchpin that holds it all together, Carl, is the ability to understand your own character and build that.
So I'm curious, you mentioned there has been many coaches that have been out there that have helped influence you and other business leaders. Perhaps if you don't mind name dropping or sharing one or two that was like, man, they really helped carve the way I think and it really was inspirational for me to help me even think about going down this path.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The first one that comes to mind to me is a man named Sean Manuel. So Sean was actually Mr. Irrelevant in the NFL draft. So he was the last pick of the 1996 NFL draft. But he got the opportunity to go play with the 49ers. And he played with Jerry Rice and all those guys. And so he saw elite at an early age, right? As a rookie, he walked into a locker room of a culture that was built. And then throughout his coaching career, he built those cultures. I mean, he was the architect of the Bishop Gorman high school culture out in Nevada, out in Las Vegas, which led to 10 straight state championships. You're doing something right if you win 10 in a row. But aside from all that, this man showed up on a daily basis and challenged you to be the best version of yourself. Not anybody else. His definition of competition was so different than anybody else I'd ever been around. It was about constantly being better than he was the day before. It was about showing up and being vulnerable and asking questions and being willing to admit your mistakes. I had never seen a coach stand in front of a group and talk about his flaws so openly and so honestly and allow that message to help guide and lead other people. So that's somebody that to this day is a huge influence in the way that I lead, in the way that I approach things. Whenever I needed to be grounded, he's the guy I call. And so he's somebody that shaped a lot of my leadership approach. And then in business, a lot of I learned from my clients. I pick things from my clients all the time. We work with a large portfolio company. It's owned by a man named Paul D'Angelo. And Paul is unbelievable in his ability to build and scale teams while maintaining a family feel. And the reason for that is this man who doesn't have to do this, but he goes to every one of his portfolio companies and all of their regions individually, and he has an open forum with every manager in the company. And I'm in these, and I was fortunate enough to be in them as a consultant and watch him taking page and page and page of notes. And this is now year 3 of our engagement with them. So not only that, but I watch him come back each year and talk about how those things were implemented. So he hears them and then he follows up on them, right? So I'm a patchwork mentorship guy. I'm always looking for opportunities to learn from people. But those are just 2 examples that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's interesting. And once again, interesting how the Super Bowl here in 2024 has Brock Purdy of Mr. Irrelevant as well. So the kind of irony, another San Francisco 49er player. So that's interesting with the first example you had with the coach. That is a great story, too. And I love it how you talked about that in his own vulnerability, right? It's interesting with really great leaders. The dichotomy is they're typically more servant-based, humble leaders. And it's what good to great. came out with. And Jim Collins, the book that's sitting, if you're watching this right now, it's right next to my book and Extreme Ownership, right? And part of the reason behind that is in Good to Great. Once again, they found Jim Collins, despite not wanting it to be about the leaders, it was all about the leaders, and it was the leaders that cared more about the company than their own ego, right? And that's what made that so amazing. And then just noting on what you said secondly, it's really interesting you talk about that, the open sessions. I want to share this, David, because it was one of my more humbling experiences as a executive. I was a relatively young executive, 30 years old, became a CFO, and we put in a new implementation system within a couple years of being there. And it was NetSuite. Actually, it was an awesome implementation. We were one of the first 500 clients of NetSuite, and we crushed it in the accounting thing. But then we replaced the homegrown system that had been there for, I think, like 10 years. Yeah, I don't know if it was that long, but it was like 5 to 10 years. But people were kind of fell in love with it, with the tool. And so we changed it. And we had a strong set of core values, and people were calling 5 of them we had, and they were calling me the 6th and 7th core value, and how angry they were at me, meaning everything that could go wrong, and how we solved it, how we helped address it. Let me clarify that. How we helped address it is we did exactly what that leader said. You mentioned we had open sessions. In this case, every stakeholder that was involved in the implementation, we listened to their frustrations, wrote them down, and then we got it done. And that's the part that people miss sometimes. You have to do both. You have to listen, you have to be present, but then you have to get it done. Because when you don't get it done, you lose your integrity once again. You lose what you win there. It's like, oh, they just listened and management just went away and they went off to their whatever, right? And they didn't be mindful of it. And I think it's really impressive that he goes around to each of the respective portfolio companies to do that, because most people do that. So I think that is a super excellent example. So kind of curious once again. Now you get to the point, you have the training. How do you do things so it helps stick?
For us, it's breaking things down. Again, we practice what we preach. We follow a framework, right? And so the framework that we follow is ICA, and I'll give a more simplified version of it afterwards. But ICA just means identify. So we're gonna identify all the information that we want to teach to somebody. We're then gonna conceptualize it into stories, into things that stick, right? Memorable things. And then we're going to give them an application piece, and we're going to give them direct ways that they can implement it today, right? And so we do a lot of workshops where there's a lot of hands-on, there's a lot of conversation. There's also, every workshop walks out with a reflection workbook where everything is now reflected on in your own environment. So the way that we simplify this for people is we always tell them, when you leave us and during these conversations, you should be able to answer the questions: what, so what, now what, right? So what is this? Why does it matter to me? And how am I actually going to be able to put this in practice? And to me, it's so much of it is storytelling. So much of it is being able to talk real life scenarios. And so I love to engage with our clients and hear that, okay, so talk to me. How would you use this in your environment? Does this make sense for you? And then we can work through some of that on their own, because a lot of times when people walk out of a seminar, they might have a general idea of the concept and they might feel like, hey, I get it. But then when they get back to their home office, they're like, wait a minute, how would I have done this? And then they end up abandoning it when it could have been a really good tool. So by working through that stuff with them during the workshops, I think that allows us to help it stick. And then just being a coach, I built my career off being able to communicate to 18 to 22-year-old kids and get them to care about things like nutrition and discipline and sleep and going to school and doing the right things, aside from winning games. And so I do have this ability that I've built over time to tell stories and to connect with people. But one of our core principles as a company is very similar to what one of my core principles was as a coach, which goes back to what I said earlier, right? Your vision, mission, and values as a human interact with what you do as a company. And so one of the things that I did as a coach, when players would come and get recruited to our schools and they would meet with the strength and conditioning coach, which was me, they'd come in my office with their parents, and I would always have them look around the office. And I'd say, what is one thing in here that is different than any other coach's office you've been in? And the answer was always the same, Carl. It was, there's no championship rings. And I said, that's right. But you've read my resume. You know I win them, right? So why is there no rings? Look around. What is in here that's not in other coaches' offices? The answer was wedding invites, pictures of me with former players, thank you notes, pictures of families, things like that. And I always said the relationships mean more to me than the rings. So when I built the company and what we do now, I'll be the first to tell you, and like I said, it's on our core values, it's on everything that we send out as a company, connection over content. We are not a content machine. We are not just here to give you a canned script and then jump on our plane and go to the next city and do the same thing again. It is about connection over content. And so if you walk in, whether it's a keynote, a workshop, whatever, I've been known to sit down on stage so I can get eye level with people and have a conversation during a keynote. Even though I'm not supposed to do that, I drive event organizers crazy because I do these things. But to me, that's what matters. That's what matters. What I'm saying is that's ego, right? If you just stick to the script because you feel like that's what you're supposed to do, that's ego. I'm here to connect. I'm here to give you genuine value. So that's how I think we make it stick a little bit better than some of the other companies and some of the other facilitators that are out there.
I think that's so critical, that connection. And forgive me for those who are listening to the podcast multiple times, and thank you. Keep listening, right? And I appreciate that. But it just continues to go back to this, when your day's end, nobody's going to talk about your rings. They might if you were like a popular person in the press, but I'm talking about the actual funeral itself. They're not going to talk about, and Joey won 3 rings. It's like, no, what they're going to talk about is the impact they had on other people. The real life experiences, and that's the reality, right? Is did we really connect with those around us, and how did we get to love them more? They loved us, where there was something true and meaningful, right? Because that's at the end of the day, we're trying to make an impact. And how do you measure impact? Well, part of impact is not just somebody changing their behaviors, but it's wonderful. You can also create that connection as well of like you care about their results and vice versa. There's something that's a two-way street, right? If it makes sense for that real connection. So
Absolutely.
I love that. I love what you're doing. I think it's fantastic. And I love how you had that connection around the 5 C's. I think it's a good job, right? From a marketing perspective, getting that all together. But what's really, it's once again, the content of it is really solid, of what you've done and how to teach it and then how to follow up and get it done, right? I like that ICA framework. I think you said, if I got that correctly, how you actually help make sure it gets implemented. Because that's the hard thing, right? When you're ever training things, how do we make sure it follows up and comes through? So how do you ultimately measure success in your business?
Yeah, for us personally, honestly, we use customer retention as one of our biggest metrics, one of our biggest KPIs. It's something that we've been so proud of since we've built this, because again, as most companies do, it started with just me, and I've been able to build a team around me, and we've now dipped into the corporate market, and we've now have athletics, and we have all these different divisions that we're working with, and all these different clients. And what is so awesome is that when people join, we call it the Edge family. When people join us, they don't leave. And so I mentioned earlier, this was year 3 of us with the large portfolio company that started with one company in that portfolio, and now now it's grown to what it is now. And so for us, customer retention is the biggest indicator of success for us. Is, are people bringing us back, and are they wanting more? Right? Is it getting more in depth each time? Because somebody could bring you in as a keynote speaker and they could just be checking a box. I want to know, like, hey, did you hear us speak one time and now you want to do advanced training with your team? Now you want us to do one-on-one programs with your leaders. Now you want us to do group mentorship. Like, those are the things that excite me. And so we definitely look at customer retention. I mean, I'd be a liar if I didn't look at the other metrics. Obviously we do, especially in the athletics world. Like, we joke about it. There's that rap song that says men lie, women lie, numbers don't. And so we look at how many of our teams are making it to the NCAA playoffs, how many of our teams are competing for championships. We've been fortunate. We have 35 NCAA programs right now that are part of the Edge family. And over the past 3 years, we've had 12 or 13 that are conference champions, as well as 15 that made it to the NCAA tournament. I mean, that's a pretty solid number, that we've been able to implement. And again, it speaks to the fact that we're coming back again and again, and we're becoming the part of these teams. So that's the way that we measure success for us. So again, it's customer retention, and then it's the results that we're getting. Like, is employee retention going up? Are our clients able to promote from within? Like, those are metrics that we want to know if they're available. Obviously, some of that stuff is private, but any information, any data points that we can get that prove what we're saying, that's important to us.
Absolutely. It speaks volumes, right, where it's a two-way street. There again, your clients are having success, but also successful clients invest in this.
Correct.
Right? They invest in coaching. They invest. We talk this so many times. Like, the really successful company. I mean, nearly every single person who comes on this podcast has a coach. Like they're hiring a personal coach to help them out to be better with what they do. And Darren Hardy says, you should be investing, and Zig Ziglar, I think, said this as well, you should be investing 10% of your gross earnings into education and self-learning so you can get better in training, so you can get better and better each year. And what he found is when he started doing that, he was doubling his income every year. So it was that investment was a 10x investment, like every single time or more, whatever it was exactly. But it was like an incredible investment of going through from that process. All right, so now we're going to flip over the personal side. You're a busy person. You're working on your doctorate. You're traveling around, serving your clients, developing content, right? You continue refining on what you do. What type of habits are you doing on a consistent basis to help keep your energy and so you can do your best?
Yeah, it's funny. One of the things that I brought over from strength and conditioning is the concept of an annual plan. And I know Jesse, I forget his last name, I don't want to butcher it, but I know he's a big social media guy. He does the big calendar each year, right? And it's a very similar approach where I work backwards throughout the year, and I like to define things in terms of blocks and sprints, right? So when I'm looking at the habits that are going to drive me, I want to be very, very clear on what my priorities are at each season of life and each season of the year. And so that kind of sets up what those habits are going to be. So there's times for me where I'm very open. And again, it's super important to be open and honest about this with your team, your family, your friends, so they know what to expect from you and over communicating that stuff. And so I'm very clear with my family and friends when I'm going into an 8-week or 12-week sprint for the business. I might say, hey, I'm going to be really, limited availability for these next 8 to 12 weeks. And that means, so when I look down at my priority sheet, that means that, physical fitness might go from, okay, I'm training 5 times a week to now I'm training 3 times a week. The other 2 are recovery days. I don't need to keep withdrawing from the account. Now I need to do a little bit more of adding back into the account, right? And so that navigates that. But I also know, again, looking at these priority sheets, if I know I have an 8-week sprint coming up, so for instance, right now I just told you we're getting ready to be back on the road here, my nutrition has to be dialed in leading up to that, because I know when I get on the road, it might become hit or miss, right? You don't know when the next opportunity is going to be to get a good home cooked meal. So for me, I'm like, okay, that means I need to be locked in on my nutrition, because I know I'm probably going to be eating, meal prep stuff that I've ordered or whatever going out. So those are some of the things that I try and do. It's just all about proactivity, processes, and priorities, right? Those are the big 3. And then from a day-to-day, like an actual tactical place, it all starts with what I call my launch sequence, which we all have a morning routine. Everybody does. I call it a launch sequence for the simple fact that when you watch a rocket take off to space, they don't just flip open a box and hit the red button and just send it, right? And yet we do that so often in our lives. We wake up in the morning and the first thing we grab is our phone, and we just get launched into our day, and we get launched into all these things. We're thinking about other people. We're taking in problems. We're taking in all this stuff. And I was fortunate to get the opportunity to attend a workshop with Damon John. And one of the things that he said was, he asked everybody in the audience, how many times have you ever woken up to an email from your clients that said, hey, just wanted to let you know we'd like to pay you double what you make right now, but we don't need you to do any extra work, right? And it was a facetious example, but at the same time, it was, we don't get those types of emails. We wake up to problems. And so why do we grab our phone first, right? So one of the things that I've really worked on is dialing in my morning routine and doing something in the morning. So when I wake up, it's first thing, roll out of bed, get water, hydrate my body a little bit. Then from there, meditate, clear my mind, reset, get back to neutral. Yep, that's exactly it. Hydrate, meditate. From there, I'm going to read, so I'm going to take in some new information. I'm going to journal about whatever's going on in my mind, and then I'm going to connect with somebody that I love. That's the first time I pick up my phone in the morning, is when I do that connection. So it could be a voice message, it could be a text message, a quick picture, whatever, but I'm going to send something to somebody that I love and just let them know I'm thinking about them today. And then I'm ready to get into my day. Right. So again, it's things like that keep me grounded. The other thing that I always try and mix in is some sort of movement. So if I'm training at night, if I'm going to lift at night, then I'm going to do a little bit of mobility in the morning, or I'm just going to take the dog for a longer walk, or I'm going to do something to get my body moving a little bit before I start my day. If I'm going to lift or exercise full on later in the afternoon, if I'm going to lift in the morning, then I'll lift in the morning, move that in. But the other important part with that is it's non-negotiable. Like, my team can see my calendar, and I'm sure your team can as well. well, they know that certain colors mean don't touch it. And my morning routine, my launch sequence, non-negotiable. It doesn't get moved. The other thing that I do that I'm very proud of is therapy. I do weekly therapy sessions. I have a mindset coach and I have an actual therapist that I spend time with every week to just clear my head, and just make sure that I'm showing up as the best version of me for my clients, for my team, and for myself. So those are just some of the habits that I use to kind of guard my energy and keep me firing on full cylinders.
I love that. That was honestly one of the best explanations I've heard on our 150 plus podcast recordings of how to do well. And I love that visualization you said of rocket launching. It doesn't go immediately, right? There's multiple different things that get through and you start seeing, and there's multiple different propulsion rockets before you even lift off the ground, right? And it takes a long way before they get to maximum speed, before they actually get through and get into space. So that was an awesome, great work on that. So now how do you measure success in your personal life?
It's very simple. Very, very simple. The biggest delusion that we have in this world is the amount of time that we get on this planet. And so to me, success is if I make more trades that I like than dislike. And what I mean by that is every day we trade 24 hours of our time that we don't know if we're ever going to get it back, or not if we're going to get it back. We don't know how much more we have. So you're trading 24 hours of an indefinite amount every day for something. So to me, every night when I go to bed, if I can go to bed and like the trade that I made more often than not, that's success to me. Like, to me, it's being able to lay down, 5 to 6 days a week and be like, I really like the trade I made today. Because life happens. There's going to be days where you don't love everything you did and things didn't go right or whatever. So I'm not delusional about it. But success to me is being at peace with that trade and being able to lay your head down at night and not need or want things to be different. Not wish you handled things differently, not wish you handled a communication or a conversation differently, not wishing that you didn't leave it all on the field as far as making sales calls or building the business. And so, I just try and do that. That's success to me.
David, another great answer. And once again, another good visualization, the trade-off. I think that's a great way of saying how you did, and completed each day. So that was fantastic. Of course, you get your 2 books, Author of the Pyramid and The Scoreboard, which I highly encourage people to go out and to buy, David. For everyone out in the audience, please, I encourage you to do that. What's a book or 2 that you'd recommend to our audience that's not one of yours that really helped influence your life?
Yeah, I really like The Last Arrow by Ewan McManus. I really love that book. It's a little bit off the beaten path, but it gets you thinking. There's some spiritual nature to it, but I'm not religious. I'll be the first to say that, and I still enjoyed the book. So you don't have to be religious to enjoy the book, because I haven't stepped foot in a church in 27 years. So it's a phenomenal book to get your mind thinking about what you're actually capable of and the capabilities that you have and the ability to really shoot until you shoot your last arrow. Like, keep going. So that was one. The other one that I really liked was Tribe of Mentors. From Tim Ferriss. I'm a huge fan of again, finding opportunities and finding ways to learn that are, outside of maybe my direct circle or my direct connections. And so to me, success leaves clues, and that's a great example of being able to find those clues. And then lastly, I would argue that every person on this planet should read either Marcus Aurelius' Meditations or As a Man Thinketh. One of those two. You should read those just for your own well-being and just for your own mindset. I think those are the ones that really help.
David, I would just like to say you crushed it today, and I'm glad I invested this hour with you to help record an incredible podcast. How can people reach out, connect, learn more about you and your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're obviously online. We have edgeleadershipacademy.com. Everything is on there. All our booking links, all that stuff is on there. We also have our weekly newsletter that comes out. And then any social media, we keep it simple. I am at Coach D Kitch. And a little insider info for your viewers, because I like doing this show and I like good people. If you're looking to skip the line and you want to get direct to me, I run my own Instagram and my own LinkedIn. So those 2 places, if you direct message me, that is me. That is not my team. It is not AI. It is not a system. That is directly to me. A little exclusive for your listeners. So if anybody's looking to get in touch, please feel free. Like I said, I just want to see people win. That's what I'm here to do. And so if there's a way that I can support you and find resources for you or point you in the right direction, man, that's what it's about, because living life in the arena is a life worth living.
David, you truly did. You crushed it today. Thank you so much, and thank you for being a guest on the Measure Success podcast. I really appreciated it.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the platform that you've built. This is phenomenal.
Absolutely. And to everyone else who's listening, I hope you've enjoyed this show. If you have, I encourage you to reach out and say, hey, David, you crushed it today as well. Tell him what a great job he did in his podcast and learn more about what he's doing. And secondly, please go rate our podcast. That's how we continue to grow. And we're trying to become one of the top 100 U.S. business podcasts. So your reviews, your ratings, your feedback, all of that goes into what we're trying to make one of the, once again, the best shows out there. With that, as we always like to say, wishing you the very best at measuring your success. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Measure Success podcast. We'll see you again next time to learn from the best. Remember to subscribe now to get future episodes.